I think having a place where people can go and everyone know your name is healing.
It is.
We know from some of the medical research that loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
15.
Hi, welcome to Pickle Me This, the podcast where the everyday pickleball player comes to laugh, relate, and feel part of the larger pickleball community. Everyone has a story. Welcome, everyone, to episode 2. Our guest today, Ella, is bringing a unique perspective to the courts. She started as a player like many of us, but her experiences in the pickleball community sparked something bigger. Now she's turning her passion for pickleball into groundbreaking PhD research, studying how this sport creates connections and supports mental health in ways we may not even realize. So whether you're a player, a researcher, or just curious about the magic that happens on pickleball courts, this conversation will give you a whole new appreciation for our sport. What initially brought you to pickleball, and what were your first impressions of the community when you started playing?
It was actually COVID. At the time, I was still an endurance runner. So I was doing the long runs, and life had become pretty lonely. I think for everyone to some degree, specifically my life. My kids had launched. I had one left at home who was sort of launched into a relationship, and I have a spouse who was medically fragile and needed to isolate, and running is a pretty individual sport. And I had friends who were telling me about the sport and said, let's go check it out. And I said, yeah, let's go ahead. And I was hooked immediately.
What hooked you immediately?
I would say the social piece of it. The fact that we could have conversation, we could laugh, talk about a point. It seemed like we were having activity, recreation, exercise, and fun all in one. And I liked that. It was much more appealing to me than having lunch somewhere and sitting down for 2 hours.
Oh, it's so true, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the aspect of playing, some people are like, oh, I don't like to wait and like my turn. At least in rec play, we put our paddles up. We might have to wait a few minutes before we go out to the courts to play. But that waiting is the perfect opportunity to connect with other people. It's like one of my favorite parts of the game. I like to play, but I also like to chit-chat.
Yeah, it's really, it's true. And it's good. I think it's good. And sometimes I still get a little like, oh, I wait, but I remind myself, meet someone new. This is an opportunity to push the boundaries a little bit and say hi. And if it weren't for those pieces, it would, perhaps go back to being a solitary sport, or a foursome or a twosome sport.
No, it's true. It's true. One of the parts when I used to play tennis years ago is I used to have to make sure I had my either my twosome or my foursome lined up and go to the courts and schedule that.
Yeah.
It's still good. Like I still like that aspect, and I definitely still do that too. But there's something about rec play where you can just, at a moment's notice, you have free time. You can just drop in. Other people are there, and you can just start playing.
Yeah, I love that. And not having to coordinate with 10 people. And, if you're coming back from work or from the office or wherever you're coming back home or from the kids, you can just stop in with your paddle and play for 30 minutes or 3 hours.
Yes. One more game.
For sure.
Can you share your favorite only in pickleball moment that perfectly captures the community spirit that you're studying?
Yeah, it's interesting when you had asked first about my feel for what it was like, the first question. I think each place sort of has a different feel, a different culture. The first place I played at was very different than North Hills or Method or some of the other or some of the places that I've played on vacation. But just jumps to mind is an experience I had at Bailiwick, actually, where I wasn't even playing. I was watching a mom drop off, like old school, like drop off her 10 and 7-year-old snacks. And I introduced myself and I said, that reminds me of when I was little. And she said, yeah, And I said, and she said, they'll be fine. And I said, oh, for sure. And I introduced myself to the kids and I said, I'm sure they have phones. And she said, oh, no, they don't have phones. And I thought, wow, this is really old school.
She was dropping them off to play.
She was dropping them off to play. She's a single mom and she was working at home, like less than a block away. And I said, this is my name. And if you need anything, you can come to me. And I watched those kids, the way they interacted, took care of each other and played with other kids. And I watched the way that the community of adults included them, how older people intergenerationally played with them. And, I had extra snacks and I gave one to the 10-year-old. I said, here, give this to your brother, and ran over and gave to the brother and then went away. And it was just reminded me of the 70s and the 80s. And in some ways, it was a simpler time. And that's the moment that just popped up for me when you said,
yeah, no, I love that because it made me, when you first started talking about it, it made me actually think of when I was a kid and we would just run rampant, not in a bad way,
right,
around the neighborhood. Like,
yeah,
my parents used to just let us go.
Yeah.
That's not so much today, but I feel like the pickleball community is a one that is welcoming and you feel safe with. So I totally understand why that mom did that. It makes sense, right? And to meet somebody like you, oh my gosh, like you're so welcoming and you like make everybody feel safe. So she probably felt great.
Oh, and maybe the child was 12. I don't know exactly the ages, but obviously competent enough and mindful enough. But it was really beautiful. And you could feel, I think the moments I appreciate most aren't about getting the point or winning the game, though that's really fun. I think it's the moments where I feel most connected to my community or my friends or making new friends or feeling part of a group.
That's right. Yeah. For those that don't know, Ella and I are pretty good friends. We met at pickleball and became good friends afterwards. And I actually texted her the other night we had played at the courts. And I got in my car and I do not kid you. I had this like sense of fullness, like playing with friends and just having a good time. It was great games. We had some good conversations, even though that day there wasn't much waiting. We kind of played a lot.
Yeah, we did.
But oh my gosh, I just got in the car. I even messaged my 2 daughters later on and I'm like, oh, pickleball. I just love pickleball. It just fills my cup.
No, I agree. Yeah, I felt it on my lower legs that day. I felt those cramps. It was a lot of play.
It was a lot of play.
Yeah. But yeah, I felt the same thing. And, having that ability to just, hey, gonna hit the court, and whoever shows up and whoever's there, and I'll see you after this or that. And it's just super fun. It's sort of, in some ways, sometimes it brings up that like little kid inside me, where I feel like I'm on the recess. Yeah, I'm at recess time, the playground, but there's no teacher telling us we've got to stop.
Yep.
That idea is really fun as an adult.
It is. I know a lot of outdoor time, and we play outdoor a lot, so it does bring back lots of memories. While we're here, before I go on to your research, which I definitely want to hear more about, why don't you tell people who are listening how you and I met on the courts?
Well, so that was pretty random. We both showed up, and who introduced us? I can't remember.
I'm not sure. Or maybe we just like started talking ourselves. I don't know. But we had played weeks and just kind of saw each other on the courts in like a fleeting high. But then we started talking.
And I remember we played, and I was like, "Where are you from?" In New York, and oh, I'm from New York. What part of New York? Westchester. Wait, you're from Westchester? I'm from Westchester. But I grew up in Katona. I went to Somers High. And wait, you went to, and this sort of back and forth. And and realized that our teams played each other and we were in high school at the same time. You played on field hockey and I got cut from field hockey. So we didn't play there.
And we're really close in age too. It's just funny how we live states away now from New York, but we met at the court, and how a lot of times you start a conversation, people start wide, right? Like, oh, I'm just from New York.
Right.
And then we zoomed in and zoomed in.
Closer
and we're like,
closer.
I'm like,
we have the same mom?
Like, no way. I'm like, just play hockey on your field.
On the field.
I'm like, I could totally picture that high school. So it's just funny.
Gosh, I remember that high school.
Yeah. And we've just become good friends ever since.
Yeah, that's right. Fast friends. It does. And I think that also binds people, connects them when there is, like, whether it be a sport, geography, location, career, but when there are those similarities, and then when those similarities intersect, I think it embeds that connection.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So let's talk about your research and how your first couple of years of playing really led to your research focus. So after playing for a couple of years, what specific observations or experiences inspired you to focus your PhD research on pickleball?
So there was so much happening in the world, and in North Carolina in particular. We had COVID happening, and then we entered into this loneliness epidemic, 2023, where the Surgeon General announced for a call of action, really, for different disciplines to intervene. And in particular, I saw, as a practicing couples and family therapist, I saw people become more lonely. And one of my concerns was suicide. And I started seeing rates of suicide in North Carolina increasing, and in particular with our young people at universities. So I think that inspired me in general to go to school. I didn't know what I could do at this time, as you probably know yourself. Your friends, colleagues are working less and retiring. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like a pull to action. So as I'm trying to wrestle and navigate that terrain, I'm playing pickleball, and I'm managing my own personal terrain with COVID and with transitions in my family, and launching kids, and seeing how beautifully the sport helped me to meld those transitions. I started wondering, how could the sport possibly help other communities and individuals? And then I started plunging into the research, to see first, like, what has been done with sport in general, not just pickleball, but pickleball is, the fastest growing sport in the country. And that's significant in terms of access, availability. It's a low barrier entry sport, and figuring out how can this possibly be used to increase connectedness. And I think that that's what my research initially is now, is to better understand people's unique experience in pickleball. Is it similar to what ours is? How is it similar? How may it be different? I'm a white heterosexual female in my 50s. Is that going to be the same experience as someone who is from the BIPOC population, or our queer youth, or someone who maybe is marginalized in ways that are different from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious about those things.
That's awesome. So from your research so far, what are some of the unique ways pickleball supports mental health that you hadn't noticed just as a player that you're thinking about differently now as you're doing the research?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't know that there was such little research. So I'm doing what may be one of the, if not the first, one of the first of qualitative research formats for recreational players. And what that means is going out into the field and getting an understanding of what people's unique experiences. I think there's been one done on ambassadors in the field, and there's been a slew of research on medical impact, benefits, and also some risks in terms of senior populations with falls, fractures, and things like that.
Yeah.
Do the risks outweigh the benefits sort of research. In terms of connectedness and loneliness, there's not a lot that exists.
So tell me more about the qualitative side. Are you talking to people? Are you asking them questions?
Yeah, so that's what I'll be doing. I'm right now waiting for the approval of the IRB, which is Institute Review Board, to get permission to speak with people who are interested and being part of research to support the possibility of using social sport and sport in general as a way to advocate for possible mental health benefits. So, it's going out and asking people's experience, semi-structured interviews, and looking for ways in which they're similar and different.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you conduct that research,
Sure.
is it informal or is it formal or is it both? Like, will you solicit people and schedule an interview with them, or will you have ad hoc conversations on the court?
Yeah, not ad hoc. So it is formal. I mean, there needs to be informed consent. I mean, this is scientific data research, so it requires people to know the range of what the research is about, any possible limitations or difficulty that may be involved, how it may or may not benefit them, any harm that it may cause. Like if I ask questions that may bring up experiences that happened on the pickleball court that weren't comfortable or that were painful or were hurtful, or so those things are reviewed. There needs to be consent before scheduling an interview. So it is definitely not an informal process.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I think afterwards I'll probably add a quantitative measure depending upon what the results show.
How long do you expect the study to last once you get your approval?
It could take, depending, if each interview is an hour long and it's just me coding that's a lot of information to sit through.
Yeah.
So, probably maybe 6 months to a year. And then if that were something to be published, that would be an additional year to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. It all takes time, right? So you're early in the research aspect. If pickleball communities were a prescription for mental health, what would the label say?
I'd say take as needed.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits, is that there's no, you must do this, or you have to do it this many times, or that I think it's a sport that you could create and define and implement into your life and make it work for you, that everyone's lived experience is unique. Some people have young kids, they can't be playing at noontime, and some of us work until, 3 to 5 or 6, and we can't play. I mean, you get to do it when you want, how you want, singles, doubles, tournaments, just rec play, league play, only at one court, at all the courts, travel, do pickleball cruises. I mean, you get to make the sport what it is. I mean, I've seen singles dating events around pickleball. People want other partners who play. I mean, there's so many layers in this, and you get to participate. And I've heard single people say, that is not what I want. I don't want a partner that plays. I want, this is my time and my space. So, I mean, I think that's the beauty of the sport is you get to take it as needed for you. And what
I love that.
yeah,
I really, really love that, right? Because kind of like we were saying earlier, you can just show up at the courts whatever time you want to play. But you could also, there are people that just want rec play, just want fun. Some people want to get more competitive. The world's your oyster, right? You could do whatever you want from it. I love that. That was great.
I think that's right.
What's the most heartwarming transformation you've observed in some of the pickleball play so far? Now, the reason I ask you this question is that I feel like you are one of the most observant people.
You're kind.
A lot of times I am not. I will admit things happen right in front of me and people are like, didn't you see that? I was like, no, I didn't notice. But you notice. So most heartwarming transformation you've seen?
I saw a player, and I don't know this professionally, but appeared to be on the autism spectrum and had a significant amount of stemming. And I saw the community embrace this player. And the transformation is no less than radical.
What was the transformation that you witnessed in this person?
Being included, being part of the team, seeing joy and happiness, what appears to be joy and happiness on a face, knowing people's names instead of being in the community and sitting apart from everyone, coming in and greeting.
There is something nice about the community that we play in regularly, where you walk in and people will literally shout, "Hey, Ella!" Multiple people. There's something very comforting and welcoming about that. And you do feel like you're a part of this community, which is really great.
Kind of reminds me when you said that of, do you remember Cheers?
Oh, Cheers.
Everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked the opening. I remember I think I was in 6th grade when I started watching that, but I remember liking the song better than the show. I was like,
yes,
Cheers is starting, but the song where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
It feels
Lots of people
like
want to feel, lots of people want to be part of a group. They do. I think it's human nature. So
yeah, I think for most people, and to be part of a safe group,
right,
and to be seen, and to see,
yeah. So now that you're turning to research, have you discovered that you're changing your approach at all to how you interact with people on the courts, or is it the same? Does that make sense? Like, are you seeing in a different lens?
I think it's because of the lens of who I was that drove me to be a researcher versus now I'm a researcher. It's changed my lens. So I don't think so. I mean, I've consistently been attuned more to people and human experience.
Yes. And I'm a witness to that.
Yeah. And I wish I had some of the other skills and motivations that just don't come naturally to me that I've seen you or other people that I'm like, wow, like, how do you know how to do this? But so I think being connected, has always been a part of who I am. As a young girl, I was friends with everyone. And then I had an interesting experience. I think it was in 7th grade, where you go from that middle school to junior high, where it shifted for me. Like I wasn't like boy crazy. And all the girls that I hung out with were boy crazy. And they're like, who do you have a crush on? And I'm like, no one. And it just didn't really awaken in me until later. And I was really pushed out of the group. And I remember being on the playground at recess with no friends and no one to sit with in the cafeteria. And I remember the pain of that. And at the time, I mean, I still feel it. I had 54. I can remember the pain of that. So it stayed with me. And I And sometimes we go through pain that we don't understand why we must go through that. And maybe must is a strong word, but maybe we can attribute some value to it. And looking back now, I think that was a very valuable experience for me, because I can walk in somewhere and I can assess very quickly and say, hi, good morning to someone, or because my natural instinct is to include people. And maybe that comes from my experience of what it's been like at times where I wasn't included. And I wouldn't want people to experience that.
Yeah. I feel like middle school is a hard age. It's a lot of friendships are changing. And I remember my one daughter went through that where her friends in middle school started excluding her. It's tough. But I also remember myself, like I remember things like that happening. I remember kickball in elementary school and standing on the playground and being like one of the last to be picked. There's like something like you remember, like you said, even at this age, that pain, because you just feel excluded and not wanted. Yeah. So that's what I think that's what we love about pickleball, is that it is more inclusive, at least our courts. And I feel like you had mentioned this earlier, that certain courts have different vibes. Yeah. They do. So even if you try one community set of courts and you're not really feeling it, try another one. Or even if you are, try other ones anyway, because they all have a different vibe to them. But you'll find your place. Most people are kind.
I agree with that. And I also think, even if it's not the culture you like, try and make it the culture you want. Like, be the change you want to see in the world. And I like that idea of try other places too, because I think it's important. And I think it's also important to say, okay, well, no one's introducing themselves before the game. I'm going to do that here.
I love that.
And you can make a change. Like, even a small little seed can grow into a mighty oak.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I feel like I'm a connector at heart. So I want to connect people. So I love all that aspect.
Yeah,
for sure. Complete the sentence. Pickleball isn't just a sport. It's
a social activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sure is. When your PhD research is complete, I know we have a couple of years, year or two. Yeah. A couple of years for the PhD, a couple of years for this research. What impact do you hope it will have on how people think about play, recreational sports, and just community in general?
Yeah, I have high hopes, and maybe I'm going to keep it high.
You should keep it high.
High hopes. I mean, when I see some of our most vulnerable populations, I think, what would it be like if we were to bring the sport into some of those settings? So that's something I'm looking at even now. Whether it be boys and girls clubs, whether it be finding donors to support building in places where people can't get to courts, finding ways people can get paddles and sneakers. I think having a place where people can go and everyone know your name is healing.
It is.
We know from some of the medical research that loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
15. And the impact that's from researcher Holt Lundstad, who is an incredible woman on loneliness. Some countries now have ambassadors of loneliness. Isn't that incredible? The UK has a loneliness ambassador. I think we should nominate Holt Lundstad for our ambassador of loneliness. And some of the measures that are happening in these countries are incredible, like building senior retirement facilities above daycare centers so that the intergenerational bonds between older adults and very young individuals can be fostered into healing connections. Mm-hmm. And these are vulnerable populations that are sometimes thrown away I think there are so many ways to bring connection.
There are.
Pickleball is one way, but I'm just passionate about connection in general.
Yeah. I think that there's a misconception out there from some people that pickleball is for old people. And I say that not to be, facetious or anything.
Yeah.
But as we've seen on the courts, it is a multi-generational game. We have children, come with their parents, 8, 10 years old. Yeah. We actually have some teenagers at our court who aren't even driving yet, like 15, getting really good. And I feel like when they first showed up and started playing, they were very quiet because they're probably like, who are all these old people? I mean, let's just be real. Right. But they've opened up and now they're getting this great exposure to how to interact with people in general of all ages. And then we have people on the opposite end of the spectrum. I would say the majority of the people at our courts lately are 30 and younger.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Sure. But there are people as old as me on our courts, but everybody is so inclusive of each other and so welcoming, which is what I really love. And there's actual conversations happening between these different generations.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the sport, and that's something that needs to be studied better as well. That's an area that there's a gap in the literature. Is the power between that intergenerational connection. Mm-hmm. When we were on the court this week at 3:00, there was a whole gang of high schoolers that they came on, and it's so fun. It's like, oh, school's out, like you're the kids. There's something really sweet about that, and to see younger people invested. I remember bringing my own kids, when I guess they were like late teens, early 20s for the first time. Maybe they were 21, but now, my daughter's at NC State and she's playing at NC State and on the rec team there. And I remember one of the things she said to me, she's like, thanks for introducing me to the sport. And that meant so much to me. Because at first she was like, I'll go with you and play one game. I'm only going to play an hour, Mom.
She's probably tired of hearing you talk about it.
Yeah. And to see how she's created friendships and she's creating these adventures and being a heavy STEM major, but having this play that I didn't see before is really exciting. I mean, I wish you would let me watch her play, but that's not something you can do. But it's really fun to hear about it and to see her having a great time. I do think it's a sport that maybe holds some bias that it skews towards an older population, but that's not to say that there aren't younger people who are entering the sport and enjoying it. And I think also I have friends who are tennis players, in their mostly 40s and 50s who say it's not enough exercise. And even in the past month, I take them out on the court and I say, let's play singles. And they're like, okay, I think I didn't really understand, or I only played doubles. And I'm like, okay, what do you think now?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, thank you for taking me out, because they just didn't realize, you think it's not enough exercise? I'm an endurance runner. It's enough exercise. Yeah. So, it goes back to, I think, make it what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think something about exercising outside is just really good for the soul too. I don't know. I mean, exercising inside is good too. Don't get me wrong, but something about being outside and moving your body, I don't know. It's just, it does something to your brain in a good way.
Yeah. North Hills in the fall, we're surrounded by trees of red and orange and yellow and the birds and the sun. And I mean, it's just like euphoric. And we play our music out there.
Oh, yes.
Parties on the court. It's so fun.
We should talk about the music because I think that's a fun story. So our courts, we usually have somebody playing a speaker of music. Yeah. It started with our one friend, I would say, probably Meredith, right? She's a music lover and she would bring her speaker. And
Is that how it started?
I think so.
I don't maybe.
And it got to the point where actually, if you go to the courts now and the music isn't on, people are like, at least this community, people are like, where's the music?
Right.
Which is actually leads to a funny story from this week, Ella. Before you got there, I started playing with Brad, and he says to me, Deirdre, is there something wrong? And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, is everything okay? And I'm like, am I playing? And we were just warming up.
Yeah.
Thinking. And he goes, there's no music playing.
I missed it.
And because what ended up happening is, I think it's like one of three people. Now there's a few other people who play too. Ella brings her speaker. We all have like playlists. I try to make mine like a multi-generational playlist.
For
like
sure.
It's anywhere from like the 60s through now. It's like a mix of music. So to try to hit some everybody's likes, hopefully. Yeah. And then usually one of the three of us is playing music if we're there, and others play too. I like all fast songs. I think some of my favorite memories at the courts, honestly, were like a couple of years ago when we all first started playing, and it would be late, like 9 or 10 when the court started emptying out. And we would literally blast the music, right, Ella? And all these dance tunes, and we'd be like singing and dancing as we were playing. So fun.
Yeah, it was a combination, of dance night and pickleball.
Yeah, the karaoke sing-along songs. Yeah, it was just fun, So sometimes you'd be serving, and somebody would be like dancing on the other side. It's fun.
Yeah, I remember a game I had with my daughter, and we did this. It was, I don't know, we were just playing too long. We were being silly, but before every serve, you had to do like a dance move. It was just so, it was just fun. We were just laughing and being goofy and playing and having a good time.
Yeah, right? It's all about having a good time. Yeah. Speaking of favorite memories, what's your favorite memory from playing? Do you have one, or one of many?
My past birthday, a group of friends surprised me at bailiwick. We were playing, maybe it was like from like
3 to 9.
Yeah, probably like 4, but it was, and one by one, it was like, I'm noticing like people are bringing stuff in, and I'm like, what's going on here? From balloons to cake to food to someone set up a chocolate bar. Someone set up a dance floor on the side with professional dancing, with a professional dancer giving lessons. I was just blown away. It was my favorite birthday. It was really just so unexpected, and to have an entire community of people. And I think one of the things that was so touching is the diversity in that night. Is like, there were young people, very, very young, and very, very old, and people who, without pickleball, I wouldn't have known them and they wouldn't have known me. Mm-hmm. And I think when I look in terms of how many religions were represented, how many races were represented, genders, identities, like it was, and just people coming together and just loving and playing and enjoying, and it will be a night that I hold forever.
Oh,
yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I remember that night.
Yeah.
On the flip side, what about your most embarrassing moment on the court?
So many.
Don't we all? Especially when it comes to my play, sometimes I'm like, oh no.
Where do I start? I remember when I first started, I started at the JCC, and not knowing anything about pickleball, but I was an endurance runner, and I was thinking that, well, I run fast, I'll be good at this sport. And I remember someone on the other side who like barely moved, but who was one of these like, boom, like on this angle, and like, probably pickled me. It doesn't matter how fast I'm running. So that was a good lesson in humility. So many lessons in humility, which I really like. And then a few falls that were really funny, a few falls that weren't so funny, 1 or 2 painful moments on the court. But, in terms of interactions with others that were just like confusing, and you don't understand it, and you realize, well, that's going to be represented. Like there's no.
And hopefully that's like a small smidgen. And it is, right? Like it's a small smidgen of the general
But I think it's an important smidgen. Like, I think it's important to accept people where they're at. And I think that's a start. It's a starting place.
Yeah.
And, I think I just am a hopeful person. For me, I remember learning about SeaWorld. This seems tangential here, but I remember they said in order to teach these big like whales to jump, and I know that nowadays this is like not ethical treatment of animals, but at the time, maybe I learned this like 30 years ago. They said how they would train these whales to jump out of the water is they would feed them. They'd give them little bits of something, whatever. But what they did is they didn't put the bar like a quarter of an inch above the water. And then when they jumped, give them something, they would actually put the bar at the bottom of the pool. So when they would just swim over it, you would praise them. And it's an analogy I've carried with me. So that smidgen, whatever it is, like maybe just the showing up on the courts, like maybe that's just the swimming over. And it's like needs to be praised because in that there's a desire for play and connection. Doesn't matter who we are. Yeah. And that there's something there to be recognized and acknowledged and celebrated.
I like that analogy a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all start somewhere.
Yes. All right. Our final wrap-up question.
Oh, yeah.
If the pickleball community had a motto based on your research, what would it be?
I know this one. It's the title of my research. Alone you may go faster, but together we go farther.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's true. It's based on everything we've been talking about.
Yeah. It's an African proverb. I don't know exactly who said it, but it resonates with me and I've carried it for decades.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It was so fun and it went really quick.
It went really quick. We'll have to have you back maybe like halfway through the research, maybe at the end of the research, maybe even before.
Whenever you'd like.
Tell us more.
To join you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will definitely be seeing you on the court.
I look forward to it. Take care.